here just a little bit. So the Yuma sector where we are, this is 156 miles of land. It starts just a bit west of here, you know, kind of getting into the Eastern California area, then getting more into central Arizona. But 156 miles of land. And as we were saying before, there are such large portions of this sector where you don't see walling and where you don't see fencing. And that's not a problem that is exclusive to the Yuma sector. You see that issue down in the Rio Grande Valley or the Del Rio area or the Laredo area as well. But this is an area where the surge has been so massive over the last few months. And there just hasn't really been the infrastructure in place, according to local officials, in order to really handle it. One interesting thing that one Border Patrol agent told us earlier today is we all talk about the border wall and what a controversial thing that has been over the last couple of years. The point that they made is that law enforcement, they view it as a tool. And one number that stood out to us is that to cover 1 mile, one Border Patrol agent can cover about 1 linear mile of unwalled area. So that would mean that in this sector, you have 156 miles. You would need 156 Border Patrol agents in order to appropriately patrol the border. But if you have fencing and consistent fencing along these spans of terrain, then one agent can actually cover 7 miles. So it goes to show that, you know, this is the point that law enforcement has made. That they believe that this can make a difference, which is why so many people here have been calling for the wall and more fencing. But not everyone is in favor of it from what we've seen. You go down to the Del Rio area or large portions of the Rio Grande Valley, you have folks down there who don't see the efficacy of it, don't believe that it'll make any difference. In fact, there are some communities where people are actually find themselves on the Mexican side of the wall while living on U.S. soil. So those are some of the stories that we're hoping to cover over the next couple of weeks. So a lot of debate over this whole subject, but we're going to try and get into it as much as possible. So the first question that we've gotten from is, what is the latest we are hearing from the Biden administration about their efforts at the border? So that's a great question. And of course, that's one of the things we're actually going to dive into a little bit tonight on Balance. As so many of us remember, the controversy around things such as the border and the wall really started to pick up in 2016. During the 2020 election, then Democratic nominee Joe Biden famously said, not another foot of wall is going to be built. One thing that we're going to be diving into on Balance tonight, the Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of Homeland Security was actually in Yuma 2 weeks ago and then made his way to El Paso and Laredo, but made an emphasis that more resources are going to be committed to this area. And I'm sure that for many of you who have followed the border consistently, you saw some of the viral videos that came out of that, where some of the Border Patrol agents were very upset about the way that they contend that they've been treated or how they feel as though they haven't had the resources to do their job appropriately. So the things that we have been hearing from here in Yuma is a pledge from the federal government in order to do more, pump more resources into covering the border, whether that's building more fencing, more cameras, more motion sensors, more personnel here on the border. That's the pledge that local officials have told us that they've received from the federal government. To this point, they haven't gotten it yet. I think that's an important distinction to make, and they're waiting for some of those resources to come in, but that's what they've been told by the federal government, is that more resources are going to be coming, but we shall see over the next couple of months how that will be looking. Another question that we have is, what are you hearing from the people who you are meeting and who are crossing? Another very good question. So just this morning, as we were saying earlier, we had a family of 3 cross right around 5 o'clock in the morning. They came all the way from Colombia. They had been traveling here for 8 days. The gentlemen, they didn't speak much in the way of English, so we had to use the help of a translator back in Chicago. But they told us that they were political prisoners and they were seeking asylum, and they have heard that other people here in the United States have been granted protection and have been granted asylum, and that's why they made the 8-day journey to come here. And you could see these people when they arrived were parched, were exhausted, were freezing cold, but they said that they have heard that other people have been able to get these kind of protections in the past. That's why they decided to make their way out here today. Some other people who we've spoken with, we typically hear people coming from the same areas over and over, mostly Northern Triangle countries. That would be Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, a few people from Mexico as well. For the most part, that's where everyone is coming from. But the majority of people who we see are either A, seeking asylum, or B, are seeking the opportunity to work. Our economic refugees is the term that's most often used. Now, that being said, law enforcement will tell you down in the Rio Grande Valley, for example, that they are encountering a lot of people in those sectors who are more on the criminal side, who are involved in human smuggling and drug trafficking. We haven't really seen that in this portion of the border so far, but other sectors we know for a fact are really dealing with this.